Welcome back, everybody. I'm Randy Bueller, joined by David Williams. You seem kind of okay with that loss somehow.
I mean, I decided I was a huge underdog and I'd already basically accepted my fate. I felt like I was going to do my best, but
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Randy Bueller,
it
joined
would
by
require
David
a lot of
Williams.
luck. Oop, I had the stream on. Require a lot of luck for me to get past it. I think I went a little nuts game one, but maybe not. I mean, I decided I was going to use the first force of will to protect it. He had middle misstep, which was kind of brutal. So once I
Sure.
force of will that, and he had a second middle misstep, I felt like I was already kind of going down that path. I'm not just going to give up now. Then he
Yep.
had a force of will for that misstep. I mean, for that force of will, and it kind of just left me with nothing. But I felt like, well, it's not going to leave him with a lot of cards. But he happened to just have, Oath and Orchard. So,
Well,
and
it
it's only
left him with land ancestral. Is what it left him.
ancestral into Oath and Orchard the next turn. It was like, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's okay, like hey, it happens. It's vintage. I'd be more upset if I kind of blew it or made a crazy judgment call that I was pondering about. I mean, that game
Right.
probably plays out different if I just pass and then play brainstorm in a turn and then sit back. But I think his counters matched up well. He ended up having a lot of force of wills himself. I think he ends up force of willing back because I didn't have missteps. Missteps were the key. He was able to use no mana and 2 life and one
Right.
card to counter my spells.
Yeah,
So
he only plays 3 missteps too. I mean, a lot of us play 4 missteps. He's only got 3, but he had 2 of them in that draw.
I knew that. That's why I was like, well, I'll counter the first one, and if he forces wills back, I can force a will back. So for him to have 2 of his 3 missteps is a little rough, but it happens. I mean, it's vintage.
Right.
So, and then game two was not as exciting. I mean, I knew he was bottlenecked on mana, and then he drew the Boseiju. He skipped a turn with land, and then his land draw was Boseiju. I even set up with the dig through time. I
Yeah.
had myself with Pyroblast, Misstep, and Misdirection backup, and I was like, okay, because I know he was setting up for Show and Tell when he demonic tutored. I was almost certain he demonic tutored for Show and Tell, and I knew he needed a third mana source. So
Yep.
I killed his land with my wear and tear. I mean,
I
I
liked
killed
it.
his Mox, and I'm like, all right. So as long as even if he draws a land, I've still got Pyroblast with Misstep for his Misstep backup and a Misdirection. And then he drew Boseiju, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I can't win. I had to, when he drew the Boseiju, I knew that he had got the Show and Tell with Demonic Tutor. I was pretty much the writing was on the wall, unless
Yep.
I was able to get a mentor into play right away, which didn't happen.
Yeah, it seems like a really tough matchup for you. I mean,
Yeah,
Oath has been beating up on Delver for a while. That was the Eternal Weekend Championship match this last year, and Mentor seems like it's got the same problems.
Yeah, a lot of people have been bagging on Mentor, like, oh, Mentor's not very well, but they don't realize in all the matches Mentor, I think, has played. This will be the 8th match I think it's played. I think 4 of the matches have been against this Oath deck, like, and this deck is almost impossible to beat. And then it's been against you twice, which is also a really miserable matchup. So I mean,
Yep.
it could be bad too. It could not be good as Delver, but I think Delver or Pyromancer Delver list would have had the same problems. I think if we were playing a
Oh, that's a
Pyromancer
good
list,
point.
if we were playing a Pyromancer list, it would have been the same result. So I don't really think much changes. We have lightning bolts instead of plows, but that's not going to help you in the oath matchup. It might help you in the merfolk matchup, but I'd rather have plow because it
It's
kills
about the
things.
same.
Yeah, and we have red mana anyway. So I don't really think it's a matter of mentor being decided to be bad. I think it's just that the matchups were bad for creature based decks. And it
So we've
really,
learned that Mentor is bad against Oath and against Merfolk.
yeah, I mean, those are
Okay.
those are pretty hard matchups. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. I mean, I think we can start looking toward this matchup. I've got the Mentor deck at like 2-7, or it will be 2-7 after this. Sorry.
Yeah, no, some people were saying I had the stream up in the chat because it was on. No, actually, I started it back as soon as we started commentating because I wanted to read the chat.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. I want to hear what they're saying, and because the 30-second lag, you get to catch the end of it after your match.
Yeah, I had just actually loaded up the screen so I could read the chat. And like Luis says, if I saw his hand, I would have never gone for the ancestral. That's fairly correct. I would not have just got blown out and discarded my hand.
Fair
But
enough. Here is our last match of the night. Steve Menendian, currently 2-3, lost to me last week against Tom Martell, who is 0-5 and quite pessimistic about the gifts deck that he's running right now. We can look at these deck lists. I mean, Menendian has basically the Delver list he's been playing, but with mentors where the Delvers used to be, the Delvers and the Pyromancers. Pretty typical example of the mentor deck. Is this how different is this from what you ran, or is it at all?
it's a little different. I mean, I'll say we saw this matchup already against Tom, but the cards that I have are actually different than Steve. Were the cards that were really important in the matchup. He doesn't have Gataxian Probe and Sensei's Top. Both were huge threats that got us in counter wars over, which kind of made the deck flow smoothly against Tom and allowed me to win quickly. He has more dig through times and more gush, which allows him to play sort of a longer game, which is a style he likes to play. But I think when you play this deck that way, it's actually going to play better into the hands of Tom who's playing a deck that needs more time. I'm not necessarily saying Tom's a favorite or anything. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a better matchup for him than my configuration of the deck because it's not as fast and it's more of a controlling,
Yep.
long, drawn out game, which allows Tom to do things like develop mana so that when he does play Gifts Ungiven, he's able to cast what he gets off the Gifts Ungiven. So I'm interested to see how the changes affect this matchup because I think it actually pushes a little more percentage points over to Tom's side.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And Tom, he certainly seems pessimistic about his gifts deck. I heard him say at one point, he built it in a meeting at work 5 minutes before deck lists were due. It is a solid list. It's just maybe a little on the slow side for where Mitch's is at right now. But if Steve has the slower version of the mentor deck, then I'm with you. I think that gives Tom a window. We'll find out.
Yeah, so looking at these opening hands, Menendian won the roll. He's got double Force of Will, double Misstep, and a couple blue cards, but he's only got one land, but he's got a hand that can last, and it's not like he's going to be put under quick
I'm
pressure
sure
with
he's
both.
happy with that hand. This
Oh,
is exactly the kind of hand Steve likes to draw up, right?
exactly. No, I like this hand. Now, Tom's hand, he's got the useless Blight still in his opener. He's got
True.
a key, which doesn't do much yet, but it does make Time Bolt just a threat. Pyroblast is fantastic against this deck, and he's got Mana Drain, and he can get it up on turn 2, and Steve doesn't have anything to play. So their hands match up where it looks like we should settle in. It's not going to be a quick beating like when me and Tom played, where I deploy a quick Mentor and spell, spell, spell. It looks like it's going to be a control battle. So it's going to be an interesting one. And a lot of the decision trees are going to determine the match.
So your win over Tom is the only win for the mentor deck right now?
I think Bob got a win, did he not? Or was Bob 0-2 with the deck too?
I believe Bob is now 0-3 with the deck. Yeah, he's 2-4 overall from 2-1.
Yeah, so Bob went 0-3, Steve is 0-2, and I'm 1-2. My two losses were to Oath. I believe Bob's losses were to Merfolk, and Steve has a loss to Merfolk. I mean,
Yes.
and one of them has another loss to Oath. So yeah, it's been pretty rough.
Yeah, fair enough. So a lot of it has been matchups. I agree that the jury is still somewhat out on how good the mentor deck is. I would not look at this 1-7 as a catastrophe, but
I just
it is
don't.
a 1-7.
I just don't see it not being a Pyromancer has mattered in any of those matchups.
Yeah,
It's not like it's been we can't cast it because we haven't had the third mana.
That happened a little bit with Steve against me.
Yeah, but I don't even think it would have saved him. I think he has a better chance with a Mentor. Just a Pyromancer is not going to get it done against a bunch of tutus.
That's probably true.
So he's going to lead with the Mox Key, leaving up mana so that he can Pyroblast need be. Steve's got a handful of missteps, so this is a great card to misstep. It makes it where you don't have to really worry about a Time Bolt as much.
Exactly.
Because you can't misbolt at the Time Bolt, so you might as well get rid of the key, something I learned against Chris. So Steve draws another non-land card, so he's going to have to pass again, but he's got a handful of counters, and like I said, it's not like there's any quick threats coming out of Tom's deck, so this is the kind of hand Steve doesn't mind. Tom's got mana and spells, so this is actually good for Tom, and a Snapcaster to rebuy the Pyroblast if he needs to.
Yeah, this has to be edge Tom. I don't know. We'll find out how good land is. Like when you're playing gifts, you've got to play 25, 26 mana sources. You've got to get a lot into play. Your whole plan is to resolve a 4-mana threat and then do some more stuff.
Now,
Whereas Menendian likes his decks to be threat dense and land light.
yeah, and I don't know if he likes threat dance. I mean, he likes to cut down to 2 or 3 creatures per day. He likes to shave the creatures.
He thinks all the cards as threats. I mean, I've heard him use the word threat dense, and I think it's because he counts Force of Will, he counts, Gush.
It's interesting with
he's kind of getting punished for it here, though, right? He's now has to discard the hand size.
Right, I was going to say it's kind of interesting with Mana Drain. There could be a scenario where he Mana Drains a Force of Will and untaps and gets to cast Blightsteel with all this mana, but with Steve, 3 pitch counters, Mana Drain's not going to resolve.
Pyro, Snapcaster the Pyro, Flusterstorm.
Yeah, I mean, now with that Flusterstorm, if he gets one more mana, it could get into a counter war and then resolve, let the Mana Drain be last and untap and have 5 plus the 5 in play. He's going to need 2 more or 1 Mox, and boom, here comes Hardcast Blightsteel. We could see it happening.
And now Tom really, not that he has a threat, but I'm certain he's watched Luis beat Steve in exactly this spot, right? If you just refuse to engage, Menendian winds up discarding the hand size. We're right where, this is the LSV playbook, right? Just don't do anything. Play lands. If
but it's not like he has
to discard.
He doesn't have anything to play anyways, though, right? He's got a handful of counter spells and a 12-drop.
Okay, it's true.
You can't just run out the 2/1 flash creature to get the beatdown going. So Steve draws a Black Lotus, which is a pretty great draw to be able to deploy threats. But he doesn't have two threats like two power or excuse me like a Mentor and a card or Dak and a Delver. He's only able to really play one card, and he can't play Dak off of a Lotus, so he's still going to have to waste mana and then play a Scalding Tarn, which might not be bad because you get to leave up Pyroblast. But how important is Dak here? I think it is because you get to card select and find some mana. So we'll see what he decides to do with this. I mean, I think the right play might be to get a land.
Yeah, sack Lotus for red, have a red floating.
Red floating and go into the counter battle. It's going to be pretty
It's
brutal.
not insane to steal the jet either.
Oh, I think it's actually kind of might be correct.
I mean, it taps for 2 mana because of Tom's Academy. I mean, on Tom's side, it does anyway.
Now, did he draw another land? Is that Scalding Tarn still in play, or is this kind of some?
No, it's on the stack. I think he's searching.
Oh, that was Tom's Scalding Tarn turn.
There you go. So Steve just passed the turn.
That's interesting. Because unfortunately for him, I think he would have won the counter war. You see, Pyro, Snap Pyro is 4, Fluster, but now with Force of Will, he's able to cast 1, 2, 3, 4 counters. It's actually, I don't know. I don't think he can.
Is the Force of Will actually relevant? There's no blue card to pitch for it, right?
Well, he wouldn't. Yeah, he can actually pitch whichever blue card he doesn't cast, and he can cast
all the blue cards. Is my point. Now Treasure Cruise is going to tempt Tom into doing something, but I think he's probably going to wait. Let's see the first move.
I don't think you want. If Steve's discarding the hand size, he's got a handful of counters, and you don't think you want to just tap out for Treasure Cruise and then have him be able to just play a Pyroblast and a Force of Will, and then untap and sack that Lotus, play a Mentor, and do bad things to you. So
yeah, I totally agree.
I don't see.
The 2 Tarns would get sacked. You wouldn't have to tap out for the Cruise, but I still agree with your line. All right, this Sapphire will allow Steve to potentially play a Dak Faden without sacking his Lotus.
Yeah,
that's what he wants to do.
They're both showing a lot of patience here.
Is it time to move?
Well, the problem is if you tap out for Dak, you have to sack your Lotus for red to play Pyroblast, and you don't do anything else with the other mana, so it's kind of inefficient. You're no longer discarding the hand size. You can wait to see what your next draw phase is, although he is allowing Tom to get his hand, filled up. But Tom's at 8 now, too, so if Tom doesn't make a play, he's going to have to discard the hand size himself. And even Treasure Cruise isn't that exciting because you go down to 7, you drop to 10, and then what are you going to do? Play a land and discard 2 more.
Yeah, I think he can.
Go ahead.
He can discard Blightsteel and not feel too bad about it.
No, I was saying from Steve's point of view, you're saying let my opponent draw up to 8. I don't care if he draws cards. Now Tom had Blightsteel, which is perfect to discard. I mean, that's one of the best situations. If you're not brainstorming it away, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and now that Steve has 8 cards with no play, he goes for the Gush. So
and this allows him to play a land and be able to play Dak and not have to sack Lotus to Pyroblast. He's still got triple pitch counter and a misstep, so depending on how he wants to use those blue cards in conjunction with which pitch counters, he can cast up to, let's see, play that 1, 2, 3. He can get almost 4 counters if misstep gets involved.
Mm-hmm. But now you've got this thing where Tom has to decide, does he want to fight or does he want to let Steve just discard at end of turn? Right? Steve's got 9 cards in his hand. Gush resolving would take him to 11. But Tom's going to fight.
Yeah, I mean, Mana Drain is pretty impressive on a Gush because then you can untap and Treasure Cruise for virtually nothing. You've got 5
definitely colors. A fight worth winning if you're Tom.
So Steve's going to rightfully not allow the Mana Drain to resolve if he can.
Right, and now Tom's in this awkward spot where the easiest counter to use is a Pyroblast, but you can't Pyro a Pyroblast.
Right,
so
but
what's he do? Flusterstorm's not going to get it done. He's going to actually have to do a Force of Will here.
Yeah, but it's fine to not be able to Pyro because you know that if this counter battle continues, there's going to be a blue counter involved, and you can just Pyro the next one if your next counter gets countered. If your next counter doesn't get countered, then you stop the Gush. So
right, but which card are you pitching?
I'm probably pitching Snapcaster. Could be Flusterstorm, but I think I want Snapcaster out of here.
I mean, you can snap back a Pyroblast or a Flusterstorm.
True, but I think this counter war, you've got to put Steve on a handful of counters. There's not lands. You're going to need that Flusterstorm at the end of this counter war too, probably.
Yeah, I'm not pitching Flusterstorm. I actually think Force of Will is worth considering.
It is. It could be Force of Will, and then you're able to let some of the counters resolve down the stack, and then Snapcaster and re-Pyro again. before these two at the bottom of the stack finish.
Right. I mean, does he really? Can't he cast all his other cards? He can Pyro, Snapcaster. No, he can't cast them all. But
Right. Well, yeah, he could. He could. He can't cast the Flusterstorm.
he's one short of casting the Pyro and the Flusterstorm 3 total times.
Right.
I still think I would force pitching force here.
No, I mean force. I think it's a judgment call. I mean, I like pitching force, but I personally like to have backup force of wills for something going out of hand later. Like you get stuck in a handful of Flusterstorm, Pyro, and Snapcaster, and then a Mentor comes out. Your counters don't counter a Mentor, and Snapcaster or Mentor takes 7 mana. So it sounds like it might be right to take force of will, but I like to have that emergency in case Steve tries to resolve a Mentor. I have an out to stop the Mentor because right now this hand is naked to a Mentor. So if Steve lets this counter battle resolve and then plays Mentor, his hand does nothing about Mentor, and then Steve can just all of a sudden make a bunch of threats, and this game's gotten out of hand.
Fair point.
So by pitching Force of Will, he's really left himself naked to Mentor, which luckily for him, Steve doesn't have. But if this Gush resolves and Steve hits one, he's going to really regret not having a way to stop him.
Note, by the way, that Steve doesn't have a Mentor because he chose it as his first discard. He could have a Mentor in that hand in place of something else if he really wanted to.
Instead of Dak Faden. Or
I don't think he had the Dak yet, but he definitely could have had it instead of the misstep he just pitched to this Mister. Oh, Dak was in the opener. Yeah, he could have had it instead of Dak.
And I think it's more important than Dak in this matchup. Maybe not, but you've already stopped.
He was playing straight to type. I mean, all my testing, I mean, I've been playing Merfolk against Mentor, so I mean, it totally changes the value of the Mentor itself, but it struck me as true to type that Steve's first discard was the creature.
Well, that's the difference in me and Steve. Steve discards that Mentor. I'm trying to get that Mentor out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And who knows who's right? It's just a style of play. I mean, he prefers to play these long controlling games and try to overpower them with card advantage and get enough counter spells to where then it's just he reaches inevitability. But it's hard to get there against a deck with a lot of counter spells itself and a lot of card draw. I mean, that's all Tom's deck is pretty much.
Now, this is just an easy Pyro for Tom, right? What is he thinking about?
I think he's calculating if he wants to maybe Fluster, Snap, Fluster, which requires triple blue. But I mean, I think you still want a Pyro. But I think he's just planning it out. I mean, it's always good to take your time there a little bit. Make sure what sequence you don't want to get in a spot where you can't do what you want to do. It's kind of a free roll to take time.
Yeah, fair. So the spell on the bottom of the stack that they're nominally fighting over is the Gush. But I mean, part of the reason Martell is so interested in winning this fight is that the thing he has pointed at the Gush is actually a mana drain.
Right. I mean, he wants that mana drain to resolve, so not only is he able to treasure cruise next turn, but he doesn't have to exile his graveyard to do it. He's going to have 5 mana floating, so he'll only have to exile a couple sack lands, and he can keep some cards in his graveyard for future dig through times. I don't know if he has them, or just for Yogg-Will, which actually he should have Yogg-Will playing a Gush deck, or Recoup, or Burning some cards.
Yeah, he's a Gifts deck, so he definitely has Yogg-Will.
He wants the card. I mean, he's playing Snapcaster in his deck. You'd prefer not to exile all your spells. You'd rather exile things like Scalding Tarn and have 5 mana from a mana drain resolved.
Yup.
So it looks like Tom has frozen.
Ah, okay.
He's cast.
There's the Pyroblast.
So Steve can. The interesting thing is Steve can counter twice, but it leaves him with nothing in his hand and just the 2 cards coming off the Gush if he decides to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom can only counter back once. So Steve could theoretically force a will here. Tom could fluster. He could let that resolve. Although if Tom flusters, he can put it on all the spells, which is interesting because then Steve has to make some choices with his 4 mana which one he wants to pay for. So it's actually kind of a risky play to kind of split that up. You just want to put them all in the Gush, I think. If you try to put it on each of the counters, it doesn't end up working out for you because he can just pick and choose where he pays.
Yeah, you lose your mana drain that way is the only problem. All right, so Pyroblast has successfully countered the misdirection. Now the force on the Pyro is at the top of the stack, and it's back on Steve to decide whether he wants to fight. He is not going to fight over the Force of Will targeting Pyro. Does he want to fight over the mana drain?
It's kind of interesting. If he doesn't fight over the mana drain and then instead plays Dak, then Tom's hand is forced because Flusterstorm can't stop Dak. He has to Snapcaster Pyroblast and Pyroblast the Dak, which, I don't think there's a lot of Snapcasters in the deck. So it's kind of interesting that he happens to have his Snapcaster and his Pyroblast and 3 mana perfectly set up to stop the Dak.
It is the Snapcaster. There's only the one. And there are no copies of Dig Through Time. He primarily uses his graveyard for Yawgmoth's Will.
Right, I found it's hard to play Yawgmoth's Will in Dig Through Time decks. I noticed, I think last season there was a few decks with both, and they didn't work out very well because it's like you're fighting for the same resources.
Oh, wow. Steve is going to sack his Lotus and add a Dig Through Time to this stack? And now Tom has to decide, does he Snapcaster or Pyroblast it, or does he Flusterstorm it?
No, I mean this. How many spells have been cast? This is where you can Flusterstorm and put like 4 on each. He's got 2 mana in his pool and a Sapphire. There's nothing he can do. I mean, this is actually pretty gross. That this Flusterstorm is going to get really ridiculous. If
Are there 8? Is the storm count really 7? It might be.
It has to. I think it's more, right? So we've got Gush, we've got Mana Drain, we've got Pyroblast, we've got Force of Will, we've got Dig Through Time, we've got Misdirection, we've got that's 6 plus the Flusterstorm is 7. I'm sure there's got to be at least one more missing. Did he play one of the artifacts to start the turn?
I don't remember. I mean, if you can squint just right, you can actually read it off the Flusterstorm. The storm count is printed, but I can't. I think it says storm count 7, which would mean the Flusterstorm. Yeah, so the Flusterstorm is the 8th spell, so he could in fact put 4 on each if he wanted to. But then he's out, right?
It says it on the card, storm count 7. Now, people are saying he may not want to put 4 on each because he wants the Mana Drain resolve, but at this point, it might be more important to have 2 counters going at the Gush so that Force of Will doesn't get, like, if you put them all on one, then he just lets it resolve on the Dig Through Time, and then he Force of Wills your Mana Drain and it stops it there. So
there may be a reason. Gush.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a reason to split it 4 and 4. Like, the Mana Drain isn't that important anymore. You've got a huge graveyard. You don't have to let it resolve. I mean, I'm just saying you have the option. It's not that someone said it's not very good to do it that way, and I'm just pointing out you do have options to split it up in 2 spells if you want.
And certainly we can see Steve's hand, so we can see that I think he is better off splitting it. It's the only way he's going to counter the Gush. Right, and it is 8 total copies of Flusterstorm.
Right, so I think now Tom is actually deciding what I said. Is it worth splitting 4 and 4? You know, assuming that, okay, I'm going to get both of these spells and not have my Gush resolve, and if he does have another counter spell, then he has to like choose. Because if Steve chooses to like pay 3 and then Force of Will 1 copy, that's fine too. You just got him to discard 2 cards. Like, there's a lot of interesting decisions.
Oh wow, he would do that for the dig though. You make it easy for Steve to force the dig. Yeah, I don't like this play. I want to counter the dig. If you want to force my Mana Drain to draw 2 from a Gush, I think I'm okay with that. If you go down to 4 copies on Dig Through Time, he can pay, force, and now his dig resolves.
How about this? 5 on, how about 5 on the Dig Through Time, 3 on the Gush, just to tie up his mana so that after his turn ends. You don't need to put more than 5 on the Dig Through Time, right? You might want your Mana Drain to resolve, but it might be better just to do 5-3.
Yeah, or 6-2. That's fair. But I mean, now it's okay. Do you really want to bother with the 2 copies on the Gush?
No, I'm just pointing out the option. I think it's safe and obvious to just get the Dig Through Time out of here. Now he has to deal with your Mana Drain.
I'm pretty sure those were all just pointed at the dig. I think. Maybe not.
Nope.
No, yeah, he split them.
He split them. And Steve might not have even noticed.
I couldn't tell quite what the split was.
Steve, there's a chance Steve didn't even notice because it's hard to see where the split goes and he didn't pay.
That's true.
There's a real chance he didn't even see and figured, okay, they're all on this Dig Through Time and click the button. So there's also a little Moto mistake value in splitting.
No, that's fair. It could have been a 4-4 split and Steve didn't realize he could actually have resolved his Dig Through Time.
Right. It's kind of.
Well, he is going to resolve his DAC, though. The way Tom had to play it, he has a Snapcaster, but he doesn't have the mana for the Pyro out of the yard, so DAC is going to resolve. Steve has to decide whether he wants to steal Mox Jet or whether he wants to plus the DAC and cycle a couple of cards. Which would you do?
I think here I'm going to draw some cards. You know, I don't know. I just feel like I've got to find something in my hand. I mean, you do have a Force of Will, so if you steal the Jet, you can Force of Will. If he only has 2 cards, if he plays something wild, you can Force of Will it. Turns out it looks like he has 7 cards in his graveyard. 8. He'll be able to cast Treasure Cruise, leaving up 3, and then Snapcaster Pyroblast to protect it, but you don't know that. So it might be right to just steal the Jet because you do have, you have a Force of Will for his card, and assuming he doesn't have 3 threats or even 2 threats, you should be okay, but...
Yeah, the Jet is the difference between 4 mana and 6 mana, the way I read it. Which, yeah, it's not nothing. Steve's going to go for cards.
If he steals the Jet, though, then it puts him down to 4, like you said.
Yeah, it's the difference between 4 and 6.
Then he's not able, let's see, he puts an 8th in the graveyard.
He can still cruise with Snapcaster backup on 4.
Yeah, because he can leave the Pyroblast in the graveyard.
Right.
And leave up 3. I think you've just got to draw cards here and try to find something to get you back in this game.
That is certainly what Steve has decided to do.
Although if he doesn't know Tom's hand, if Tom's hand doesn't have to be Treasure Cruise Snapcaster Mage, it could just be, two random mana cards or just like a random counter. It's not probably not a counter spell, but it could be cards that are not very exciting right here, that are not very dangerous. He doesn't know that it's Treasure Cruise, which is one of the best cards he could have here, and a threat / protection for it, which then would be pressuring the Dak Vaden.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So he discarded Swords, which is pretty, it's worse than all those other cards in this matchup, and a land. Much rather keep the triple counter so that once he uses Force of Will, he's got Force of Will. If he draws one more blue card, he's got another Force of Will. So it's on Steve. I'm not sure what he's thinking here. He doesn't have a land drop. He's already resolved all the spells he could play. So Tom's going to sack in his upkeep. He's a firm believer in the deck thinning. I always like to keep one in case I draw Brainstorm for my draw phase, but he doesn't have any dead cards in his hand. He does now, but especially when I'm playing Blightsteel Colossus, I always like to keep one if I can, but he knows he's going to have to use it here for this to keep Pyroblast in his graveyard, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sacking it either way, you may as well do it upkeep. Tom Martell looking like he's in pretty good shape this game, right? He's going to resolve this Treasure Cruise. I guess it really comes down to how good the cruise is.
Right, we've seen some crummy cruises that are just all land.
Cannot misdirect a Treasure Cruise, so Steve is presumably going to point Force of Will at it and then get the bad news that Tom's holding his one Snapcaster Mage.
Maybe he won't, though. I mean, maybe he figures, he's only got 4 mana. Yeah, I kind of like letting it resolve because then you can counter a threat. It's kind of like, do I want to discard 2 or do I want to just keep these Force of Wills, hope that some of his draw phases are mana, and that he's only got really 1 threat, and I can counter that.
Wow, and Tom drew the Tinker right after top decking the Blightsteel Colossus. The stupid Blightsteel Colossus is stuck in his hand. That Tinker does almost nothing now.
Right.
Like he can get the other half of the Vault Key combo. I think he plays Vault Key, right?
Yep.
But with Blightsteel in his hand and neither half of that combo in place, the Tinker, it goes from being amazing to terrible.
Right, he pretty much drew 3 blanks. I mean, he drew some mana, which, he will be able to Snapcaster Treasure Cruise if he wants to get to 10 mana.
How close is he to hard casting Blightsteel?
So let's see. He's got 3, 6, and then Lotus adds 4. He's up to 10, plus the land drop is 11. So if he plays this land, draws 1 more mana, he can sack everything and play Blightsteel. But then if you get Force of Will, you've just blown your Lotus and tapped out.
But now your Blightsteel is shuffled back into your library, and you can tinker it out on the next turn.
So he needs Steve to not find a blue card, but Steve's got Dak Vaden, so on the top 3 cards, he probably would find a blue card.
I think in this hypothetical, Tom can actually defend the Tinker with Snapcaster.
True. Very true.
Still fire in his yard.
Although, but then here's the funny part. I'll steal your Blightsteel with my Dak Vaden.
You're right, of course. You have to Snapcaster Pyro kill the Dak first.
You don't really want to fight over getting a Blightsteel in play anyways. It's cute to think about casting it, but Dak Vaden stops that. So it's actually...
With all of that, do you just Snapcaster kill the Dak right now?
Snapcaster
for Pyroblast the Dak?
I think so.
He's thinking about it. There's nothing else he'd be tapping mana for here. I think, that Dak, I mean, it's definitely an issue. Your hand has both a Blightsteel and a Tinker in it.
If you're going to do it, you want to do it now. You don't want to give him a chance to...
Deny him as much of the card selection as you can.
Right.
All right. You can't quite Snapcaster the Cruise, right? That was never happening.
He needs to get to 10 mana, right? You can't use Delve, so he has to actually get to 10 mana to do it, which he would have had he not done these. You can use Delve on Flashback?
I think so.
That's awesome. So I guess he could have.
Yeah. You can.
I've never done it.
So is he actually going for the Cruise here?
I wouldn't know. I've never done it.
Does he? I'm trying to look at the targeting. Is Snapcaster targeting Treasure Cruise? He plays Lotus. He taps Academy for 2. Lotus is 5/6. Delve 2, yeah. I think he is snapcastering back the Treasure Cruise.
This is interesting though because even if Steve force a wills it, which he didn't force a will the first, he probably is not going to do this one. But he's going to have a threat here that can attack Dak now, so it's actually kind of in a bad position.
Hilarious. Treasure Cruise. You know what's better than Treasure Cruising once? Treasure Cruising twice. What are we thinking about here? Is this on Steve?
Yeah, I don't understand who it's because neither player can respond to targeting
Right, right.
what their hands are. There's nothing they
I think
can do.
Steve's just trying to sort out how Treasure Cruise. You can't
Yeah,
cast.
I think he was like,
Oh,
and this happens, and now he's like, oh,
Black
that.
Lotus. You can cast it.
It's all, you know what? Force a will in that Black Lotus. I guess if you're going to do that, though, you could just force a will the Treasure Cruise. But force a will in that Black Lotus, he has to pass because the Treasure Cruise doesn't do anything. But
Funny.
you could always just force a will the Treasure Cruise and make him exile his resources, anyways.
Yeah, yeah, especially against a young muscle player. Pretty weird game one these guys are playing. This is Tom sitting on 0-5, trying to get his first win.
I'm hoping he doesn't because I want a 1-game lead. If I go because Kai just passed me. Kai's got 2 wins now.
Yeah, if and Steve is on 2-3, right? This drops Steve to 2-4.
Yeah.
So the bottom of the standings could be Steve at 2-4. If Tom wins this game, it's you and Tom tied for last, but Steve, Kai, and Bob are all within a game of you.
Yeah,
Steve wins this game, then it's Tom at the bottom at 0-6, you're at 1-5, Kai and Bob at 2-4.
I'm going to have to bring the heat. I'm going to have to bring some heat.
I wonder, what is this heat you speak of?
It's just going to be Dredge again. Let's be real. All right, so now he decides to force will this one, which is actually kind of amazing because Tom's hand is 2 blanks. And Steve needs to find his dream would be here to draw like a mana source Dak into like Ancestral and Mentor and be able to just go off. But so there's the mana source. Let's see what he finds. Well, there's Mentor. So he's able, if he discards Force of Will Mox, he can play Land Mentor. And then it's pretty much it's a top deck war, which really favors Steve in this position right here because he's going to have a DAC out. He won't be able to protect it, but it's only going to go to 3. And then next turn, he can DAC into threats and start making 1/1. And this game would be over fast unless he finds a way to win very quickly, which I don't know what that way is with Voltaic Key in the graveyard and Blightstone Colossus in his hand.
Yeah, any Yawgmoth's Will and Gifts Ungiven are both approximately lethal on the spot. I guess Yawgmoth's Will by itself is not lethal, but Gifts Ungiven is. It's not really a top deck war if one guy has a Mentor. I mean, I would say if it was an actual like blank board top deck war with the mana the way it is, I would favor Tom's side of this.
Oh, not just a Mentor with a DAC in play.
Yeah,
so
but Mentor plus DAC. It's not exactly a fair fight. One guy's looking at 3 cards a turn, and half of them, majority of them, make monk tokens
and draw more cards, which make more monk tokens. So this, like, say he were to find a dig through time here, get out, shut the front door. I don't want to think about it. I mean, this. Think bad things are about to happen.
Man, it's all because Tom cracked that fetch land on upkeep and shuffled Blightstone Colossus to the top of his library.
Yep, that's it. That's it. It's butterfly effect. We need to go back in time. What's he going to tinker for here?
Wow, he's going to tinker?
Do you have his list up? What's
I mean, he can get the Time Vault, I guess, so that
Yawg Will is just game.
Exactly. Oh, top. Well, that's nice. I like that play. I didn't think of that.
Of course, you got to find business.
Yeah. Snapcaster chipped away at Dak Faden there. Steve, of course, uninterested in trading a Mentor for it.
So we've got Ponder, Demonic Tutor, and Polluted Delta.
Demonic Tutor seems like a good card.
Yeah, I mean, it sets him up for next turn because he won't have, if he Demonic Tutors now, he'd have to tap the top, and then he'd only have 2 mana left, and I can't think of 2 mana that, I mean, has he played Ancestral yet? But he won't have 2, yeah, he can't Yawg Will. I mean, with 2 mana left, I think the only thing he could get is Ancestral, but that's not going to win the game right here.
Right, he might want to DT now. He could DT for gifts now so that he can untap and gifts with a couple of mana left afterwards.
I mean, do you even need to gifts, right? Your yard is Black Lotus Key Jet. I think you can just DT for Yogwell and then
A
play
DT for Yogwell. Yeah, you're right. Yogwell all by
Jet,
itself does it.
Jet Lotus Key, Tinker for Time Volt, or D-Tutor for Time Volt, and that's the game.
Yeah, you're right. No need to stick the gifts in. So yeah, he's going to go ahead and DT now so that next turn he can Yogwell with mana.
I mean, he could get gifts, but you don't actually need to get gifts. I think it costs 4, and your academy makes nothing, so you're gonna have 1 mana left over. I think it's just better just to get Yawgmoth's Will right now.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah, and then next turn you just win the game if he doesn't find a counter. But I think Steve is smart enough to know that. What card is he detutoring for passing? It's going to be Yogg Will. You need to find a counter spell right now with this Dak Fade in your 2 draw phases.
Yep.
Ooh, he drew another Mentor, but you got to hold that in Dak and try to find a counter. And you have to know that he got Yawgmoth's Will, which means you have to know that playing Mentor doesn't do anything here.
And Steve can see there's a key, and either the DT or the Tinker can go get the vault.
So we found the dig through time, which is what I said. So you're going to discard the other 2 cards, and you're going to dig through time, leaving up a red mana. Because you don't know that he has a Blightsteel Colossus. You could think he just didn't tinker for it because you have Dak out.
Right.
So he really needs to find Force of Will blue card here. And I think he knows that. There's 2 Force of Wills in the graveyard. He could find a Gush. I mean, there's a lot. He hasn't played a land yet, so there's a lot of options. He can find more cantrips to find it. Well, like I said, he doesn't have many Force of Wills left. And I see one. First card on the top right there. Force
wow. Dak Faden, ladies and gentlemen. Mentor +2. Mentor turns into Dig Through Time. Dig Through Time turns into the Force of Will in the blue
card. Now, this is going to be interesting. I mean, he's still got a Fade. Ooh. There's Time Vault, but there's a Time Walk, which is you can set up for next turn, which is great.
There's another Dig is apparently the other interesting card.
So I think I take Dig, and I mean the problem is you're going to have to pitch whatever blue card you take to Force of Will, and you pretty much know that. So you want to get almost a card that you don't mind. If you end up having a Force of Will, you're fine and it's out of your deck. I don't know if you necessarily want to remove Time Walk out of your deck in this spot because you do not want to give Tom a lot of time. Oh, he had a Mox.
Wow.
Didn't
he took the Pearl and the Walk.
He's going for the kill.
He took Mox, Pearl, and Time Walk, eschewing the Force of Will.
I didn't see a Mox. I couldn't see what cards he was choosing out of. So right now he's going to get to attack for 5.
That's kind of awesome.
11. And next turn he's going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 spell. So he's going to attack him to 11.
He's empty-handed, though. This totally depends what the top of his deck has, right?
He also has a Dak activation.
I understand, but he goes from empty-handed to one of the top 3.
Actually, I like this gamble because if you get the Force of Will and Tom has a counterspell, you just lose the game. This way, he has to
2 triggers though. How many prowess triggers is it going to take him to win the game?
It just takes. He needs to play 2 spells, so he needs
2 spells.
Cantrip
into cantrip.
No, he's going to have 3 cards, and if he finds like a preordain right here,
well, there you go.
You preordain or ponder into another spell. I don't think it's actually that absurd.
Okay. Yeah. No. I think I see your point.
Any draw spell, you find another.
Wow.
You can just find a Mox off a draw spell.
Yeah, this preordained, and he still has the DAC activation. So you're right. This is going to work. He basically had to find a cantrip. In his top
it's not as far fetched as it seems. Like if I saw Mox Time,
you're right. Just about any cantrip does it.
If I see Mox,
that says draw a card,
and like Gush, or I mean anything, and you have DAC.
Preordain.
With DAC out, knowing that by taking Mox Time Walk, not Land Time Walk, Mox Time Walk, that you only need 2 spells in your next turn, I think it's actually correct because there's so many draw spells still in your deck that are going to find you another draw spell.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, Tom sees it. Crazy. That was a weird game. Cool game, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm happy. I got to keep Tom below me. And it's my testing partner, and they're both friends of mine. I consider them both, they're both good guys and friends of mine. But Steve and me work together, and I need Tom one person below me. I need that match win.
Oh wow! I guess I guess I clinch not last if Tom loses here. That's not nothing.
Oh, you've got 3 wins already.
I've got 4 wins.
Oh, you got 4. Don't worry about last. Come on.
I'm not saying I'm actually worried about it. I'm just looking at numbers. right? My worst record possible is a 4-5.
I would say because if you want, if at, before this, when you got your fourth one, if you wanted not last insurance, I would have sold it to you. Don't worry. I'll come up with a fair price.
Hey, we were one match away from having a 4-5 finish last year.
Yeah, but we didn't have multiple people with 5 and 4 losses at this point in the season either.
That is true. That is true.
Me, Kai, and Tom haven't really been impressive. So look at Steve's sideboard. I can talk about this sideboard.
That's my last 3 opponents, by the way.
You're definitely going to want Pyroblast here. Stony Silence is really nice because you want to constrain the mana. Grafdigger's Cage I found is surprisingly really good in this matchup because it's
it is. Yes, I was also surprised when I discovered that. And at this point, it's just wow, absolutely. If you have cages, bring them in against the Gifts player.
So you're bringing in those 5 for sure. You don't really want to get Chewer. I mean, I could see Steve coming up with some weird plan to stop the mana, but I don't think you want that or Wear and Tear. Hurkyl's Recall you don't need, or Pulverizer Mountain. So he's bringing in 5. Now the hard part in this matchup is sideboarding out because you're already so stacked against the control deck. I think Steve's probably going to take out at least 1 Mentor, but
at least
I hate taking the creatures out, but you don't want to take out your counter spells. Your DAC is actually good here. Swords to Plowshare is not good at all. So you got 3 there, but the next 2 are pretty hard. You could maybe take out a Mock since you're going up to 2 Stony Silence. Because Stony Silence is great against top 2, so I could see maybe taking out 3 swords, 1 Mox, and like
a Mentor.
Yeah, Steve's play a Mentor. I personally would do like a cantrip, maybe a Preordain, or or maybe even a land. You don't really need that much mana in this matchup. Although if you're cutting a land, you'd probably rather cut another Mox. You'd probably rather cut both your Moxes if you were going to go on that plan.
He's got 3 Moxes, by the way. He's got the Pearl.
Yeah, so you could cut 2 Moxes and 3 swords if you don't want to cut the Mentor. If you're bringing up double Stony Silence. Yeah, there's a card missing in that sideboard. That's only 14 cards.
It's a Slice and
Oh,
Dice.
so the last card is a Slice and Dice. So yeah, you're not bringing that in. So we've got, this is Steve's list. Let's check out Tom's list. Now Tom's sideboard, Tom's going to bring in Duress almost certainly, I think, because you want to make sure you resolve your card. He doesn't want Cage and Chewer. He definitely wants Slice and Dice, although Slice and Dice is not as effective against the Mentor because all you have to do is respond.
No, I'm not even sure you bring it in.
So you're going to bring that in. We're back at the game. Okay, let's check out these hands. Now, it looks like Steve already... Steve has 7, so we can't see one of his cards.
It's a misdirection.
It's a misdirection. So he's got no land, but he does have a Mox and a Lotus and a Preordain and a Cage and a Stony Silence. I like Steve's hand. I think he's going to keep it.
It's kind of hilarious that all his mana comes from artifacts, but he's got a Stony Silence.
Yeah, and then... But he's going to... it looks like he's going to use them to get started, and then he can finish up with a Stony Silence.
I mean, it is certainly true that the Gifts deck is the mana-hungry deck. It plays all the Moxes, plays Vault Key. I think Steve's correct to attack it, even if it is ironic the way this hand plays out.
Tom's hand, he's got Misstep, which I always love to have a Misstep in the opener. He's got mana, he's got a cantrip and a mana drain, Demonic Tutor for the other half of Key Vault if he's able to resolve those cards. So
yeah, it's a good hand.
It's a no-brainer to keep. It's it doesn't have a Force of Will, it doesn't have early protection, fast mana, but it's a solid hand.
Steve's Black Lotus is both his only source of blue and also his only source of white.
Yeah, I think he's more likely to use that for blue and Preordain.
I think I agree with you. It's because you have Cage to do with sink one of those into. It's just
and the thing is, you can Preordain into a sack land, find a Tundra, use the 2 floating mana from the Black Lotus with the Tundra, play the Stony Silence. First play Mox into your Grafdigger's Cage, and then you've got a Stony Silence, a Mox, and a land out.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is Misstep's probably going to get his Preordain here, which hurts a lot because now you've sacked your Lotus. So he might want to bait with the Cage because you really need that. You need that Preordain to resolve right away to find a land.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll have to see which one Steve leads with. Tom probably snap misdirects the first thing he sees between Cage and Preordain.
Yeah, I think so. Now, the Duress is going to be actually pretty sweet. All he wants to do is get rid of the counters in Steve's hands, and then he can Demonic Tutor and set up Key Vault for the win. So things that cause Steven to counter before he displays Key and Bolt, or actually find counters, are really good for him.
Yeah, it's another reason to just misdirect the first thing you see. You'd like to get into a misdirection fight, clear a path for your Duress. All right. Oh, Scalding Tarn. That was a great draw for Steve.
Yeah, I see a lot of the chat talking about Steve's hand, but there's a lot of things people don't consider is he's also on the draw. And being on the draw, you have an extra draw, you have an extra card to find that land. I mean, and you have to gamble a little bit in vintage. You can't just say, oh, this hand's not perfect, because then when you look at your 6 card hand, you're 1 card lower, and you could get a hand fairly similar but 1 card less, and you get in this mulligan vortex. So now you have to go to 5, and all of a sudden you're thinking back to that first hand. I mean, you have to take some chances sometimes in vintage. It's easy to kind of look in hindsight, say he weren't to draw a land and he gets his card, he doesn't win the counter war and he doesn't draw anymore. Oh, he should have mulliganed that hand. But you can't look at it like that. You got to look at what's going to win you more likely over time, over if you do it multiple times over.
Plays the ruby? What is the ruby doing here?
I think it allows him to cast his cage without showing a land or sacking the Lotus and baits mental misstep.
Okay.
You'd rather not sack Lotus for it. You don't want to play your land yet because you might want to get Tundra, you might want to get Volcanic, or you might want to make him think you're looking for land.
I'll buy that.
He's probably going to sack it for a blue source and play his Preordain anyway, so he doesn't want to start with it. The Ruby, I think this is a good play. If you're going to bait with the cage, you want to do it with Ruby. Because if you do it with your land, you can't cast a Preordain without sacking Lotus. Now this is interesting. I don't know. I mean, I might have used my land, but then you can't. You'd have to sack your Stony. You have to sack your Lotus for white mana to play Stony Silence. So
yeah, I think he's planning to Scalding Tarn for a Tundra, and get the white mana there. Use one of these floating blue for the other half of Stony Silence.
Yeah, and this allows him to actually find another 1-mana cantrip and cast it with the floating blue because he has one left over, or find Ancestral. And if he finds a Mentor, he can actually play the land and sack for white and play Mentor with Force of Will backup. And then you can get Tundra, play Mentor next turn, and play Stony Silence and get a trigger off the Stony Silence. Whereas Pyromancer, you wouldn't have got that trigger. Also, last game was another victory for having Mentor over Pyromancer. Had that been a Pyromancer, that game doesn't end that quick. That game doesn't end with Time Walk win. That game is like put you to 6, go, and then Tom wins.
That's a fine point.
I think you lose a lot of the same games you would have lost with either deck, but you win more games. Like I won games against Gristlebrand with Mentor that I would not have won with the Pyromancer. Whereas the games I've lost, I would have lost with either most likely. And I think that people aren't seeing that yet. The games, they lose the same games, but this one can win games the other one can't.
I feel like there's games you lose because your guy costs 3 instead of 2.
I'm sure it is, but I think with this league and these matchups, it hasn't really come up in these blue deck matchups.
Dig Through Time was the interesting selection. Now, do you Stony Silence here, or are you digging?
I mean, you can't dig, right? Because he's got 4 in the yard. He's going to have 3 mana. That's not enough to dig. I don't love Stony Silence here because he's basically Stone Raining himself.
He does shut off Vault Key shenanigans. He knows Tom has more jewelry in his deck than Steve does.
The thing is, it is nice to have it out. I mean, I'm going to play it. You've got Force of Will, you've got a dig, and once you Force of Will, you'll have 5 cards in your yard. Sack land sets you up to cast that dig because you have a mana in play, and the sack land will basically pay for 2 of it with 4 in your yard plus the Force of Will. So assuming you Force of Will. What's that?
Mox Jet right on cue.
Yeah, but he's still going to be able to get a land in Duress.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of, if he takes the Duress, he can take the Dig Through Time out of his hand.
Steve can actually, you can misdirect a Duress, right?
I think Duress says target opponent.
Is it target opponent?
Thoughtseized says target player. I'm almost certain Duress says target opponent. I can't read it on my screen. It's a little blurry.
I know you can misdirect the Thoughtseize.
Yeah, that says target opponent almost certainly. I can kind of make out the words. See, I think he's deciding if he wants to detutor or Duress. I don't really know what you could detutor for here with this much mana. You're constrained. You're stuck on 2 mana. Normally,
right. I mean, the Stony Silence is doing great work there. I mean, the plan was to demonic tutor for the key.
Right. No. So he's gonna Duress. Now the question is, if Steve Force of Wills, then he can untap, find a sack land, and cast Dig Through Time. But he doesn't, which is fine. And you don't want to let him get 2 cards. You would let him get 1. You've still got Force of Will in case anything goes wrong. And now you're just looking at top deck here.
Yeah, it's a top deck fight where Tom's at 2 mana and Steve's at 1. Now this is really a top deck fight.
Yeah, this is a fair one. Another card that's, Stony Silence is really hurting. He doesn't have mana to effectively use Yawgmoth's Will. So LSV says he doesn't understand Steve's plays. I'm wondering which play specifically. I wonder is he talking about maybe he would have forced a will to duress so that he could hopefully find a land and resolve dig through time. I don't know if that's what he's meaning, but
I
that's
think
something I
it's
would.
the Stony Silence over the dig.
Oh yeah. Well, he couldn't have cast dig that turn.
But by playing Stony Silence, he took it
The thing
away
is,
for a while.
he would have had to burn that 2 mana and pass, and he would have been. He would have still been two. It would have 4 in his yard with 2 in play. One of which isn't even double blue. It would
Yeah,
have
but
been
he could have used the fetch land for the Ponder instead of sacking the Lotus.
That is true. Now that was very confusing to me. Just fetch land, pass, and leave the Lotus up.
All right, well, Tom's going to use this DT. I'm not sure what he's going to get. I don't know that he has an answer for Stony Silence.
Yeah, let's see. I looked at the sideboard and I was listing the cards. I didn't see anything. He doesn't have Abrupt Decay.
That's just permanent. Vault Key is just down. So does he get a Tinker for Blightsteel? He gets a Treasure Cruise. He just wants value. That's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, Tinker, he's still 1 mana away from casting, and then
Right.
and if it gets counterspelled, which he saw Steve's hand, he knows that he's doing nothing. Where Treasure Cruise is gonna get countered too, most likely, but there's a chance Steve just won't counter it like he didn't before. He's definitely going to counter a Tinker.
All true. And Tom's what, 1 mana away from a Cruise with Mana Drain backup? Or does he need a second? He's a second mana.
Yeah, it costs
He's got
8.
6 cards in yard, right? So he needs 1 card in the yard.
He'd have to tap out or get a card in the yard so that he can Pyroblast back up. And if he gets a sack land, he can actually. So that's interesting. You can actually play your Mox Jet now and it makes a mana.
That's the plan. Yeah, and then you pay 2 mana for Treasure Cruise and wipe the graveyard. It's less than ideal with Yawgmoth's Will in hand to wipe out the graveyard.
Yes, that's the problem with these Treasure Cruise, these Delve cards with Yawgwill. It's really a fight over the same resources. That's kind of difficult.
He's just going to wait.
Now it's funny. He's going to wait.
He could have played the Vault.
Once Steve plays the Cage, it takes the Yawgmoth's Will out of play, and then he has no real reason to care about Treasure. He's just going to Treasure Cruise at will.
That's true.
Like, oh well, no need to hold off anymore.
He might manage. I mean, he might Mana Drain the Cage. It's worth thinking about. Steve either blows a Force of Will, or you keep your Yawgmoth's Will alive. I mean, I don't know that I would want to fight Cage normally, but holding Yawgmoth's Will?
If he finds one more land, he can play Time Vault, and now his Academy casts
Right.
Mana Drain and his Volcanic casts Pyro. So he also can set up to where he can.
Wait, why didn't he just play the Time Vault last turn? He could have played the Time Vault off the non-Academy lands and had up Mana Drain.
Or maybe he wants to have up 2 counters right here, Mana Drain and
He's got Mana Drain Pyro. I'll buy that. That's probably what he's thinking.
It's funny, Steve drew another Mox. So I'm wondering if he didn't board out 2 Moxes like I suggested. When you bring in 2 Stony Silence, I really think you kind of don't want to have it. You don't want to draw dead, which is you're drawing cards.
To be fair, he's only bringing in 1. 1 was already there.
True.
He was clearly willing to have 3 boxes and a Lotus with a Stony Silence. I mean, my Merfolk deck has 2 main deck Null Rods boarded up to 3. I have Lotus, Sapphire, Petal. So I have 3 total artifact mana. He's at 4. Wow, that was a draw.
And now he can protect it with only 1 Pyro or Mana Drain, and Steve's only got 1 counter. Ooh, he didn't cast it, and Steve drew a second counter, so this is actually able to get misdirected now.
I feel like Tom needed to run out the Time Vault at some point. Just
I agree.
Tap for blue. Well, I mean, if you were sitting on untapped mana, maybe pick a fight here so that you can untap and resolve a card draw spell. I would pick a fight here, because otherwise Yawgmoth's Will is a dead card.
Yeah, I don't know if he brought in. Did he have Ingot Chewer? I don't know if he brought in.
He has access to Ingot Chewer. I don't know if he brought them in. I think I would Mana Drain here, leaving up the Volcanic, obviously. And I'm actually rooting for Steve to fight back.
Right, so then you can say sure, and now you can resolve your Ancestral, or have Ancestral with 1 counter backup, and hopefully resolve it.
Steve's not interested in fighting.
Steve says sure.
Well, at least now your Yawgmoth's Will does something.
Yeah, he's still a long way from that.
The game doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon.
That is true.
So 1 free mana for Mana Drain. Gifts is probably too expensive.
Yeah, I mean, he has to tap out to cast Gifts. He wouldn't be able to defend it. I think he's just going to cruise here.
That 1 mana might price him into a Cruise. Wouldn't be
Yeah, but I
easy.
think it's the only real play. You could just play Time Vault and leave up your Academy, but you don't have Mana Vault anymore, so that's not any big exciting thing. I think you just cruise, and then you can also Ancestral and in response and Pyroblast in response.
Sure. So you cruise rather than ancestral because you want the ability to respond with the other one.
Right. Although I think he's gonna cruise. Steve might Pyroblast. He's gonna just have to let it pass because he can't do anything about Pyroblast. And
That's
Steve
true.
has this direction for the Ancestral Recall, which you can then Pyroblast. So the Ancestral probably is going to resolve, depending on the order he does this.
Right. So there's the cruise. Tom uses his entire graveyard, so the DT is gone. Everything that was there is gone.
Yeah, this is actually going to be good for Tom.
Pyroblast will resolve. Well, you can respond with ancestral, which
He can respond with Ancestral, which Steve will then misdirect, which then he can Pyroblast. There's no more counters from either player. He gets to draw 3 from the Ancestral, and if he finds a way to stop the Pyroblast, then he's right back in business.
Yeah, he's even got a blue card for any potential Force of Will.
Yeah, so this is actually
Tom
great.
cannot pyro this misdirection fast enough. He's just hoping that Steve's out.
And it looks like Tom didn't notice he had a colorless mana in his pool and exiled an extra card in his graveyard. Which is kind of brutal. And now he can Force of Will.
Found the Force of Will. Wow. He gets to resolve both the Ancestral and the Cruise. Pretty nice.
This was pretty big beating. And he drew 2 dead cards, notice, with his Ancestral. He did draw Force of Will, but he did draw dead card, Colossus, Mox, and now he just drew land, another dead card, and Flusterstorm. Unfortunately for him, this Stony Silence is doing work. I mean, his deck is really...
I'm not convinced that Colossus is dead. Tolarian Academy is going to be tapping for an awful lot of mana.
Yeah, but the artifacts aren't going to tap for mana, so he's still going to need quite a bit of artifacts and land to cast mana drain.
Academy taps for 4. Yeah, I guess he's only at 7.
Yeah, even if he deployed every artifact in his hand, he's still at 7 mana. He's still 5 away.
It is too bad that he had to exile an extra card from his yard.
No, he was able to use that colorless right there to play Soul Ring. I mean, he could have played it with his Scalding Tarn, but now he can leave up Flusterstorm. So it actually worked out.
I think I'd rather have a Demonic Tutor in my yard, though.
I agree. Ooh, now Steve's turn to Treasure Cruise. He's got Flusterstorm, so if Steve has no reason to play Mox first, so he can actually leave up. Ooh, he can't leave up 2 mana.
Can he not? How many cards in his yard?
Doesn't matter. He only makes 2, and he doesn't have a land. He taps 1. He's only got 1 open. That artifact doesn't tap.
You're right. Flusterstorm is going to counter Treasure Cruise.
Flusterstorm will counter Treasure Cruise. Is Steve patient enough, which I believe he is, especially because he loves that. Oh, no, he wants to cast it. I figured
Tom tapped out. I think you have to go for it. Things don't get better if you let Tom untap.
Right, but Tom's not tapped out either. I mean,
true. He's tapped down to basically Flusterstorm and
Pierce or Pyroblast. Although he's played 1 Pyroblast already.
And he only has 1. That is the Pyroblast.
Through his whole list.
2 in the main, 1 in the board. My bad. He has 3 total.
So yeah, I mean, you could argue that it's worth waiting for another blue card and keeping that as a backup blue card for this Force of Will, so you can stop.
I would have gone for it.
Oh, of course, I go for it too. I'm just pointing out that I actually expect if anybody was going to not go for it, Steve's the guy who might do it. So if he goes for it too, then there's nobody waiting.
That's fair.
Because he's the one guy that might just hold back.
And Tom's hand somehow, despite resolving both a Treasure Cruise and an Ancestral Recall last turn, his hand is a mess.
Yeah, he can play this Mox. And
he can Yawgmoth's Will for the Ancestral is the one thing he can do. I don't know if he can also cruise off of this. Somehow Time Vault has still never managed to get into play. How many cards can he... The Ancestrals, he'll have 5 cards left in his yard? No, he's like 1 short of also being able to cruise.
He's got a Black Lotus. He can discard the Blightsteel now to Thirst for Knowledge.
Yep. He can Scalding Tarn out of the graveyard, which is, I mean, it's value, right? And if he had a Demonic Tutor in his yard, he'd be able to cast it here.
Well, he doesn't have black mana. He'd have to Scalding Tarn for it, yeah.
That's fine.
Right.
I'm just saying this Yawgmoth's Will turned into merely an Ancestral, and it's almost better on a couple of different angles.
So Tom can cast Thirst for Knowledge, discard Blight Steel. He's got Force of Will backup, and he can hold the blue card and Force of Will and Mist up if he needs it. And if he doesn't play anything, then cast Thirst for Knowledge. Although now it's funny because his Thirst for Knowledge, it's going to get hit. He's going to get Flusterstormed at the end of Steve's turn. You would think. I mean, if
he's not going to risk it.
He didn't cast the Thirst. He didn't walk into it. He wants to leave open mana because with this Academy now he can Force of Will. If he plays these artifacts, he can just tap Academy as his Force of Will land. He's got 4 in play now, so he can tap a land and play 1 more if he wants to just make it tap for 5. It's sort of free at this point, the Sensei's top.
You told me this Blightsteel was never happening. We're actually getting there.
Academy's I didn't say never. I just said it's a long. I said even if he gets it, he's still a long way from casting it.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
It's up to 9 now.
He's still at 9. He's still 3 away, and they have to be artifacts in play. And then it just gets countered. I don't think he's shooting for that. I think he's going to try.
Thirst for Knowledge. Yeah, Thirst for Knowledge is clearly the play here.
Now he's got plenty of mana to pay for these Flusterstorms. Actually, someone said Blightsteel would exile because of the will, but isn't it a replacement clause?
It's a replacement. I actually looked up exactly the same thing. If Blightsteel would be put into the graveyard, reveal it and shuffle it instead.
Like Emrakul would exile because it goes to your graveyard and triggers, but Blightsteel doesn't even go to your graveyard.
All true. Yeah, he discards the Time Vault, not the Blightsteel.
He's getting there. No, he found a Mox. He's there. He is there.
I mean, in a couple of turns he is.
It's going to go Force of Will, Force back, Flusterstorm. Okay, you got me. There was my big finish. It looks like that. So is this there's artifacts underneath our name or no? So that's 6, 10, 11. So next turn he's there with Force of Will backup, but unfortunately for him, Steve has Force Fluster backup. So he needs to draw. He has to draw another free counter, but that's not gonna help.
Steve draws his last Mox.
Yeah.
Nice Stony Silence. The mana here is hilarious. Menendian is on 2 mana. Tom is on 12.
And the game is pretty much fair. I mean, I would say it's kind of... Oh, Brainstorm is huge here, especially with the sack land in his hand. This is huge.
Yeah.
That was one of his best non-broken card draws he could have right there. Oh, wow. He hit a lot of business. So now, is he going to shuffle back in at the Blightsteel? He is. He says, you know what? I don't need to cast that anymore. I'll find it later.
I mean, he might wait a turn to crack his fetch land.
Very true.
I think I would, right? You've got double Force of Will backup now and a Snapcaster.
I might play Dak, and you can even take his Mox Ruby, and then next turn you've got double Force backup with your Blightsteel Colossus. Yeah, if you don't sack the sack land, if you take it, 1, 2, 3, oh, he sacked it. You would have he'd actually have Colossus with double Force of Will backup. Although just his luck, he would take that line. Steve draws a blue card. Now Steve's got Force of Will with double Flusterstorm backup to stop the counter spells. So it's actually good he didn't take that line. He's just going to Snapcaster and cast. It looks like he's got a Thirst for Knowledge there. And
he's got a Cruise in there, doesn't he?
And he's got a Cruise, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Ancestral got exiled on the Yawgmoth's Will, but I'm pretty sure the Cruise is still in there. I would guess the Cruise is the play.
We actually have a chance to have a first. It couldn't have happened last season. Well, it could have, but probably not. What? Tom has 11 minutes on his clock.
Oh, you're kidding.
He has 11 minutes. This game has taken a while. He's actually got less land than Steve. If it takes him a little while
time than Steve, we're going to have our first clock game and Menendian could win it?
There's
no way.
This could actually happen. If this game takes, let's say, 3 or 4 more minutes and they have 7 minutes for game 3, Tom could be the first guy to lose to the clock, and it would be against Steve, who is notorious for his time, but Tom actually is the one to lose out on it.
Wow.
We might get some epic salt from Tom if that happens.
Wow, that is insane.
That's what I'm rooting for. No offense to Tom, but I want to see a first. I like having first in the Vintage Super League. We had our first turn 1 kill with you. This season is shaping up to be a great one. It took me a while. I looked over at the clock. I'm like, wait a minute. The clocks are in play. This is where Tom has some kind of error during sideboarding and says, "Hey, we got to restart the game." Work and like, oh, new clock. But I mean, we got to honor these clocks. That was put in play this season. We did say 40-minute clocks are a thing.
Yep. You lose on time.
So he treasure cruised after shuffling and still hit the Blight Steal with double Pyroblast backup. But this is actually great because he's going to actually win fast now. He can take the Mox if he chooses. Next turn, cast Colossus. If he draws a land, he'll have Force of Will, Pyroblast backup. If he doesn't, he's just going to draw cards. He can do that. He won't be able to take it next turn because he's down to 1. Or no, he's up. So yeah,
he can actually no interest in hard casting Blightsteel.
He can do it next. Oh, he discarded it again.
He discarded it.
So that actually, if he's not listening to the commentary, he's probably not thinking about the clock. Because if you are thinking about the clock, you kind of want a fast win, which Blightsteel lets you do.
No, it's fair. He actually commented back when the match was just starting that he's been sick for the last week. I don't know if you remember. We heard him on the cast last week. He was pretty visibly ill, and he said, "I wish I hadn't taken that NyQuil."
This is going to be fantastic if it goes down this way. Oh, he's resolving Jace though, and Jace doesn't win quickly either though. So. Oh.
These have been some complicated games. We had the first game with the giant Flusterstorm stack, and
no, these games have been so good. They made me forget about that beating Luis gave me. I've already. So we've got a Flusterstorm battle, but it looks like. Let's see. Unfortunately for him, Tom's hand is just full of counters.
Doesn't he just pay?
Yeah. Oh, no. Wow. Oh, Steve forgot about the clock.
Wow, Menendian. Menendian with the gift.
Wow, Steve.
He just gifted his opponent 4 or 5 minutes of clock, maybe. That was a very sportsmanlike move there.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't. The game wasn't over.
You don't think Tom would have conceded in the same spot, do you?
I don't think so, and not even because of the clock. I mean, if the clock's not in play, I still think you play it out a little bit because you don't know Tom's hand. I mean, he did have Dak in play, and he does have Jace in play, but you got to play a little bit. I mean, regardless of the clock, you play a little bit to see what he does, see how he plays it. Maybe he could just draw bad. I mean, he's probably not, but you still play it out a little bit.
Yeah, you're going to lose to Dak plus Jace. You're going to lose.
I really don't think Steve remembered the clock as a method, and I think if he did, he might have played it out. A lot of people are saying it would be scummy. I don't think it's scummy.
I don't think it's scummy. I mean, the rules are the rules.
Yeah, that's it. That's in play. I think that's in play.
I certainly would be ironic. Tom was certainly one of the players in the league who was most pushing for shorter clocks.
And Steve was one of the players that hurt the most. So it actually would be kind of some sweet justice if Steve had went over Tom when Tom wanted clocks and Steve didn't. So that's another reason for Steve to say, you know what, I'm going to punish you for this clock.
Yeah, it's not like Steve was fighting against clocks, no. But he is the slowest player in the league.
No, Steve didn't fight against it at all. But he's probably the player affected most by it.
Certainly, if we took odds on who we thought was most likely to lose on clock, there would be 10 votes from Menendian, including himself.
Right. Or also, if we had a silent vote who doesn't want the clock and somehow it turned up 9-1, I can tell you who that one was.
Fair. All right. I don't know. I don't know that I want to see the clock. You can root for it, but I want to see a real match of Magic.
Well, the thing is, if it goes to the clock, we got to see a whole lot of Magic.
That is true.
We got to see the most amount of Magic you could see. I mean, the most Magic would be one guy wins on the clock with the other guy with 1 or 2 seconds, but we would get, some of the most Magic ever. So yeah, someone wrote in the chat, didn't Steve make one of the Dredge players play out the kill? Yeah, he made me actually attack through him, and I was actually very nervous.
Well, to be fair, that was like 30 seconds, right?
No, not about time. I don't mean about time. I just mean
about misclicks? Yeah.
I was like, because I was just a little scared that with the lag, I somehow clicked through my attack phase. But I think he would have probably just conceded if I clicked through my attack. He said he actually wanted to see how much damage I could do, just to see how low his life would go. It was more for excitement to see it say like negative 123.
Agreed. Yeah, that's all that was going on there. Pretty big game 3 here. I mean, in addition to any extra clock drama, these guys both need this match win, right? I mean,
I need this win. I don't want to be last.
That is part of the drama. Totally counts.
I mean, oh my God, I don't know what I would do if my Tuesday nights weren't VSL. All right, so let's look at these hands. Steve's first. He's got some counters as usual. He needs to find a third mana source so he can get that Mentor out. Tom's hand has Lotus with Pyroblast, Treasure Cruise Thirst. So he set up with 2 sack lands for a Thirst into a Treasure Cruise at some point with a Pyroblast backup. But if Steve is able to play like a Mentor next turn, Tom's hand doesn't do anything to stop it. And then pretty big spot for Steve to have a Mentor out. It puts a lot of pressure on Tom to find a way to win the game quickly before it's over. So he's going to not play the Voltaic Key, it looks like. Oh, yeah, he's just going to pass. That way he can Pyroblast without having to sack his Lotus. If he were to play the Key and needed to Pyroblast, he'd have to sack the Lotus. No reason to get the Key out right now.
Steve once again with no second land.
Steve didn't find the mana. It's pretty brutal right here for him because, I mean, there's nothing really he could do to stop that Mentor. He would have to thirst for knowledge to try to find a Force of Will. And then once it's out, his hand actually doesn't play out for the quick kill unless he finds Time Bolt, which Steve has double counter plus misstep.
Tom not even going to bother with a key.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
opponent gets a land drop, right?
You're in no hurry,
especially if your opponent's missing land drops.
And it allows you because now if you can sculpt different lines of play, knowing that Key Bolt is still in action.
Steve doesn't draw land here. He's discarding the hand size, too.
Yeah. It's fairly unfortunate. Last game, he drew all his Moxes. In this game, he's just not drawing mana. So it's on Tom. Tom's deciding if he wants to detutor or play the key. He's just going to sit back. This way he can cast Thirst for Knowledge if he wants.
Steve does draw a land. So Scalding Tarn, much better than discarding.
Now let's see if Steve actually goes for Mentor. I go for Mentor here, but I'm not doing so well, so maybe I'm not the right person to talk to about this. But I think with Mentor, you want to get it into play as fast as possible because then once it's in play, counter wars become gross because even if you lose them, you've developed an army. Oh, I lost this counter war, but look at my army. He chose not to do it. Nope. He's going to play the controlling route, which is typical Steve. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything else from him.
I would run out the Mentor there.
Yeah, I mean, and who knows? It probably works out bad. Right now, you do have 2 counters to back it up, so it's hard for it to work out bad, but he could Thirst into Volt and have some counters. Maybe he has a double Force of Will Key Volt hand. I mean, it's a weird feeling to tap out for a creature. Mm-hmm. I like to do it, but I like to gamble. Hey, if you got me, you got me.
It's not like his untapped mana does anything with that hand.
Right.
All his counters are free.
And you've got double Pitch Spell plus a misstep.
Well, the Pyroblast is the only thing he was leaving up by not going for it.
Right.
So now he is finning before he starts his turn.
Because I mean, imagine that turn there. He plays Mentor. Tom responds with Thirst. So I guess everything changes. You could Force Will the Thirst if you want. And then you've got Misdirection up right now, and Tom has this hand, which really, I guess he has Detutor Key Bolt, but you've got Misstep. So this is not gonna resolve. I'd imagine him misstepping the Soul Ring to keep the mana off because you really want to keep the Gifts Will deck from having mana.
Oh yeah, you definitely misstep the Soul Ring. The only question is whether you pay 2 life for it.
I'm concerned with him using I guess he has a land drop still. I was like, you kind of want to leave up black mana. He didn't play a land yet though, so he still can play black mana.
Steve with 2 missteps in his hand just lets the Soul Ring resolve. I guess with the Black Lotus, he figures there's all the mana in the world, but
yeah, I'm not a fan.
So hungry.
I'm not a big fan. I mean, you really want to be able to stop them from having. I mean, this is a lot of mana available. If he just passes next turn, he has a lot of mana available with it untapped, with another land drop. Like, that's how the Gifts deck beats you, by being able to play all these threats in one turn. Mm-hmm. Bottlenecked, you're able to stop it from doing anything. I really wish there was a Mentor in play.
I mean, he did spend his mana that turn, right? He did a Pyroblast. That's basically, by not playing Mentor, he left himself the ability to Pyroblast something, and he did. And
it actually looks, it's almost bluffy in a sense, too. Now Tom's wondering, like, he didn't play anything. He doesn't have a Mentor. Does he have more counters? Like, it makes you have to think about it. You have to respect those 2 mana untapped. Whereas if you've tapped out, you're only really worried about Force, Misdirect, Misstep. You don't know Steve has a handful of those, but you actually have less to worry about.
What is Tom thinking about here? He's trying to figure out how much to go for.
Yeah, I think he's figuring out, like, does he want to go for D-tutor? Does he want to play key first? Does he want to D-tutor first, see if it resolves, then play key? Does he want to pass? He's got enough mana to, like, if D-tutor resolves, key Volt with Pyroblast back up.
Right.
Does Steve have... The thing is, Steve said go with that mana up, so he's like, Steve must have counters. Or if Steve tapped out, he might have went for it, and then Steve could go Force of Will, Misdirect, Misstep, win the counter war. Now he has an army, untap, cast a whatever I draw, and attack you for a lot. So I actually think playing the Mentor there would have worked out great for him because Tom would have went for it.
Well, here's the thing, though. Tom said go, and now Steve is going to get to play the Mentor. Tom will presumably go for some stuff, and
it's going to happen anyways, basically,
yeah,
without
exactly.
describing. Well, he's got Gush in hand now with Mentor, and he gets to replay.
He had Gush last time. Yeah, I am not in love with Tom's decision to just say go last turn. I feel like he should have done something. I mean, there's a ton of options, obviously, with a Demonic Tutor. So many things he could get, gifts, whatever.
So this is certainly going to get misstepped. It makes a token, and it stops Tom's card selection.
I mean, I guess Tom's plan last turn was to play control. Against no Mentor, he figures if we just play draw go for a while, it advantages Tom. And you know what? He's probably right. Probably does advantage him to play draw go for a bunch of turns.
So the funny part of all this is, so let's say he Pyroblasts the misstep. He's not, but he's going to go D-tutor. He's got a Pyroblast, which gets misstepped. He Force of Will's D-tutor, he Pyroblast. He misdirects. Then he gets to go Treasure Cruise and just draw a new hand. And he could theoretically just hit the Time Bolt and just have Volt Key. Then the question is, does Steve make him Volt Key him with 6 minutes on the clock?
No way. You concede to Vault Key. Come on. You would concede to Vault Key.
I would concede to Volt Key 100%.
I would too.
But who knows? These two do have a history. I don't know if you remember, there was a Twitter battle between these two a few years ago.
Oh, I forgot about that. It was like a message board battle. It was pre-Twitter.
Degrees were brought into, like, what college one went to. I'm a lawyer. Well, so am I. Like, these have a little, this is like a villain kind of matchup here. These guys, I don't know who's the villain in here, and each other the villain, but
no, they went at it. They managed to get each other banned from Star City's message board forum or something, right?
Right. They were talking about where they went to college and who's a lawyer. Like, these guys have a little history where one might say, you know what? I'm tired of this guy.
All right. Tom goes for Treasure Cruise. Steve is going to start by responding with a Gush. Picks up 2 lands, wants to draw a couple of cards. Tom should let that happen, right? I don't think you Pyroblast the Gush.
I don't think you do. I think you're going to have to, with this hand, you want to use the Pyroblast to protect your Key Volt. So you just got to say, I got to use this to try to resolve Key Volt.
I like the way Tom is sequencing his spells here. He's essentially trying to bait permission with this Treasure Cruise when he's got the game in hand. Demonic Tutor for Time Vault, Voltaic Key. And I guess he needs 6 mana, so
6 mana, because it would be pretty funny if he gets it in play, but they can't use it, and then Steve untaps and Stony Silence. That would be epic.
Or untap and a million prowess triggers.
So Luis brings up a very good point, though. He doesn't know about exiling Lotus to cast this because D-tutor for Yogg-Will, not D-Will, that's me, but D-tutor for Yogg-Will is a thing, and you want Lotus in your graveyard. So
yeah, I don't think he's thinking about Yogg-Will right now. I mean, it's a fair point. Maybe you want to tap a mana to save the Lotus there.
All I know is I'm looking at 5 minutes and 6 seconds. So he's thinking. He drew another pitch counter.
Yep.
Yeah, this is actually pretty absurd here. And he's still got a misstep and a misdirection if the Pyroblast gets involved. Although, if he missteps, misdirection does not stop Key Volt.
Right, it doesn't stop Cruise either.
This is actually pretty crazy. The thing is, he's at 18. He's got all it takes. That's 4. Every trigger adds 3. He could gush into. He doesn't have enough mana. I'll say he can go crazy.
Tom is going to Pyro the Force of Will. That seems like the right play.
Although he's going to have more creatures in play if they have a counter battle. This could be interesting. Steve could draw into cantrip and maybe like kill him even if he gets key vault in play because he can't use it. I mean, it's a long shot, and I haven't even done the math and thought about it, what he would need to parlay into, and he only has 3 mana in play. He'd have to play a land, float mana, gush, draw like he doesn't have a
Yep.
top in his deck. It could get there. I'm thinking about it.
That would be pretty crazy.
Wow, if he didn't scoop that last game that fast, maybe took another minute or two. Although, like I said, if he resolves key vote, which is where if he doesn't resolve key vote, he's probably losing anyways. And if he
Sure.
does resolve key vote, you're probably conceding anyways. So the clock actually doesn't really matter that much. There's not any scenarios where he doesn't resolve key vote, but the game keeps going on and he doesn't lose to these tokens.
That's true. That is true. All right. So Steve uses his misstep on the pyro, of course, makes another token. This means that Steve's Force Will is going to counter the Treasure Cruise, but that was all bait. Tom Martell, the whole time, wanted to pick a fight over the Treasure Cruise so that Voltaic Key could resolve, and it now does resolve. Through that, there's no longer a misstep over there. Demonic Tutor, yep, Demonic Tutor is going to resolve also. Misdirection doesn't do anything about that.
This is crazy. So Steve has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in play. Steve needs 3 spells to win the game.
3 spells?
3 spells to win the game. Gush is one.
Oh, you can Voltaic Key to untap the Soul Ring. He's 1 mana short. He's exactly 1 mana short of, well, more than that because he wouldn't have had the key untapped. But yeah, Tom Martell has said check. I got you next turn. Steve Menendian needs to play 3 spells. That's your count?
Now, when he gushes, it's really interesting. He kind of needs to leave white mana for Stony Silence, but if he draws 2 blue cantrips, he's going to really hate himself.
Yeah, blue and a white. Seems like the play.
Here we go.
All right.
You can somehow have the cards come in your hand one at a time.
You want the sweat?
Oh my God, my heart is beating 100 miles an hour. I need Steve to come on, Stony Silence.
Not going to do it.
Nope.
Flusterstorm and a misdirection. There's not even anything to point the misdirection at. Wow.
Now here's where Steve needs to make Tom get down to like 2 seconds on the clock and then just concede. Slow roll him a little bit.
4 minutes with Vault Key? Really?
I actually think he can do it. I 100%. I could take this spot and win 100% with 4 minutes.
I'm sure LSV could too. Like Tom Martell while sick and on NyQuil though.
I mean, with the F keys and just immediately you do it, and all you have to do is find Tinker, and then you win. Well, actually, you have to attack twice, but yeah, Time Walk. Someone said Time Walk. Yeah, Time Walk is a great out.
Yeah, a lot of things Steve could have drawn there. I thought he had a legit shot. I mean, we could do the math. I don't know that he's a favorite, but he definitely had a sweat.
I mean, he could have drawn something like Pyroblast blue card and then just play 1 Pyroblast it, or misstep blue card, play 1 misstep it. I mean, he had a lot of options.
You know, if Steve was psychic, you know what he could have done last turn? He could have misdirected Tom's Pyroblast and saved his mental misstep.
Yeah.
Would have let him counter the key. That would have been the psychic play.
It would have looked real suspicious.
It would have looked super sketchy. Yes.
There would have been people saying he's stream sniping if he makes that play. They're like, what is going on here? This doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think Steve is coming to grips with the fact that he's not going to get the turn he needs.
And now I'm tied for last. That's brutal.
Yeah, this assuming Tom does win this match, which it sure looks like he will, he'll tie you for last at 1 and 5. Gifts will be on the board. Mentor will be fully 1 and 8. And having merely split with this gift deck that I don't expect anybody to consider for next set, let's just say.
Yeah.
We talked about it earlier, though. The Gifts deck did have some rough matchups. The Oath decks and the Merfolk deck were both very tough matchups for Mentor, and that's where I think 5 of those 8 losses came from. Oh, Steve has not scooped. That's what's going on.
I actually think he's going to mess with Tom a little bit.
He didn't even attack?
Which means I think he's messing with Tom.
Okay, Yawgmoth's Will for DT for Tinker?
Yeah.
He tapped wrong if he's going to do that. He doesn't have 2 black.
He can just do it next turn. He's got them all.
Surely he's messing with him.
He got them all. Yeah, Steve's just messing with them.
Clock has officially gone yellow. I mean, the kill is there, right? Yawgwill for Young Will for DT for Tinker.
Yeah, so it doesn't even matter if Steve was we will never actually know if Steve was really joking. Scoop. We'll never actually know.
Can you troll a troll? That's the question. Yeah. All right. Steve has seen enough. I appreciate that. I think that was about right, right? You troll him for a good 60 seconds. Make
The
him
thing
take a
is,
couple of turns and then
yeah,
scoop. Isn't that about
yeah, I would have done probably play like 2 turns. I probably messaged him, "You got to beat me, bro," in our Skype chat. Like, sorry, but what college did you go to? I would have kind of made, and then I would have conceded like a turn. I would have messed with him for definitely a little bit. You have to give him a little bit if you're going to lose like that.
I agree. I think Steve played
Because
it pretty much exactly right.
man,
Wow.
it was fun. That was a great. That was the most fun I think of the night. That match there. That was good.
It was pretty fun. Well, that's week 6 in the books. Next week we get new decks. You're happy to get a new deck?
No, I liked my deck. I want new matchups.
Okay.
But I'm actually happy to play something new just because I like mixing it up.
All right. Well, let us see how week 6 wound down. We can take a look at the standings and see how things are shaping up. Kai against Chris. Kai got there. So Kai moves up to 2 and 4. Chris falls into a tie for 3rd place at 4 and 2. So Kai trying to get some distance, but I mean Tom also won. So still only a game ahead of last place. Second matchup, I got the win against Bob. Pretty bad matchup for the Mentor Control deck. 4 and 2 ties me with Chris for 3rd place. And Bob, I was wondering, is he starting to sweat? He's in way better shape than he was at this point last year. Last year, he started 0-5 and then rattled off 4 in a row to escape the basement. So
Bob is my last opponent.
Oh, wow.
There's a chance, there's a chance I could play him to force him to tie my record or to just pass him or just be out of it if he just wins 2-0. But that could come into play as a battle for last. Bob is my final opponent. I play you, Rich, Shay, and Bob.
Yeah, I figure the road to last place goes through me one way or the other because my remaining opponents are Tom and Kai. And I just beat Bob.
So we really need you to show up with something powerful, but yet that I can beat.
Something like that, exactly. And yeah, we keep talking about last. It's because the last place player does not get invited back for next season. So if you weren't around before, Josh Eder-Layton was a lot of fun to have around last year, but he finished last, and we all agreed we wanted to play for some stakes. So 10th place does not get to play season 3. Third match, Rich Shay's Delver deck against Eric. And man, the heater is real. 6-0 and 2-game lead on 3rd place. Eric has now clinched playoffs. So the worst that Eric can possibly do is wind up in a tie for like 3rd, 4th, and 5th. There is a chance he could get sucked into a tiebreaker. You can still get 5 players up to 6 and 3, but it's really hard. And for all intents and purposes, has clinched top 4 at this point. Rich falls to 3 and 3. Luis also keeping pace with Ifro. He took you down, making you sweat the last place and putting Luis in great shape to run it back for playoffs again. So Eric and Luis could go back-to-back on playoffs, which would be a pretty impressive stat here.
Yeah, I'm out of that.
Yeah, Steve Menendian's not looking particularly good for that either. We just saw him lose to Tom Martell. So you and Steve were the other 2 playoff players last year. Steve at 2-4 is actually going to get the little bit of the tight collar around last because Tom's on the board at 1-5. So Gifts gets on the board with that win. Pretty interesting stuff. I think the Shops decks went, 4-2 this set, which is 3-1 in non-mirrors.
Yeah. Ifro 3-0.
Oath went 5-1, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I hate to keep saying this, but it's true. It had a lot of got to just play a deck that can't really beat it. I mean, Ifro and Luis were trying to say, "Oh, your matchup's not that bad." That matchup is bad.
Oh, I mean, it should be about the same as Oath Delver, which has been bad for months and months.
It's bad, yeah. I mean, I do not like playing that matchup. So yeah.
Mentor went 1-8 for the. Merfolk went 2-1, and Delver. Did Rich go 2-1 or 1-2?
Rich went 1-2, I believe, because he lost this week and he wasn't 2-0 with the deck so far because he started.
Yeah, I mean he's 3-3 in 2 sets with the Delver deck. Well, that was week 6.
Delver again. That's the interesting. Will Rich show up with Delver again? I'll be prepared for it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean you've got to give him certainly his range includes a lot of Delver.
Yes.
I don't know that you can't. I wouldn't put him on 100% Delver, but I mean that's the single most likely deck for him to show up with. I would think.
Yeah. Although me just saying that, he's gonna know. Now he's gonna be like, "Ooh, Dave knows," and it's a leveling war. Was I kidding? Was I serious? But
Definitely.
it's always. I mean, I play you, Bob, and I know Bob's probably not playing Delver. I doubt you're playing Delver. You don't have to say anything or even smile. But I think Delver's a little boring. I'm not gonna play Delver probably, and I don't. I think you're kind of in the same boat as me. But who
No
knows? I
comment.
mean, you're trying to get to the playoffs. You're up there in
Oh
the big
yeah.
leagues, so you
No,
might
I'm
just
thinking
bring
about it.
out.
I'm 4-2, and
Yeah,
I
you're
don't know.
right.
I feel like I'm 4-2 despite having already gone through the sort of Luis Efro portion of my schedule.
AKA, I get to play you, and I get to play Kai and Tom, the
No,
guys
there's
that
no
are
easy
winning.
matches. There are no easy matches.
You get to play the guys at the bottom. I get it. That's okay.
I'm just saying the Eric and Luis matches are a little harder than the others. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, I'm 0-2 against those guys. I feel you.
You know, I somehow Luis keeps playing these decks which have just insanely powerful draws, and we see him week after week get the insanely powerful draws. And then somehow, for 2 seasons in a row now, he saved up all of his garbage for me. I'm
Yeah.
actually 2-0 against Luis.
His draws were so good against me. He messaged me after as soon as he beat me. He's like, "Sorry, my draws are ridiculous" or something like that. I'm like, "Hey." But I've seen it every time we've played. He just has these amazing draws, but that's okay. You know, like you said, against you, he's just had the bad ones. So
Yep,
you win some, you lose them. I mean, vintage is a very high variance game, and if you aren't prepared
definitely.
for the swings, you probably shouldn't play it. I mean, that's what it says. I mean, Kai is one of the best players in the world, and he was 0-5. He probably made a few mistakes. We all do, but it doesn't. It's not because he was a bad player. It's just because that's what happens sometimes in vintage. Sometimes they just have key volt on turn one, or they just have it and you lose.
Yeah, it's true. So these last set of decks, week 7, 8, 9, at that point, top 4 will advance to the playoffs. 10th place gets relegated out of the league. But the other cool thing is, if we have any ties for any of those spots, you know, first, second, third, fourth, or 10th,
Bonus magic.
more magic. Last year, we almost had crazy 8-way tie for like third through
I stopped it.
last.
I was the guy that said nope. I won
Yeah,
the
you had to
round.
beat Josh in the last round to turn it off. Came close. But yeah, we will have tiebreaker matches. Those tiebreakers, the way the calendar works out, we have an off week scheduled for the week of Pro Tour Brussels. So what we'll do is, and that's actually the week in between week 9 and the playoffs. So if we do have any ties, we will actually have a show that week. I mean, not only do you get bonus magic matches, you actually get a bonus show. There will be Vintage Super League on the week of Pro Tour Brussels, if and only if we have some ties that need to be broken. So give you guys something else to root for.
It's just gonna be one tie. It's gonna be like me versus Tom tied for last. Just the Tom Williams show, and we're just gonna
That's
play.
a big game. That's a super big game. The tie for last has got bigger stakes somehow, doesn't it?
It kind of does. It kind of does.
All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun hanging out with you, David. This
Hey,
last match was certainly an enjoyable one.
yeah, it was. It was great. And like I said, next week I have my daughter, so you guys won't see me commentating next week. But hopefully, 2 weeks from now, the second week of the new decks, I'll be able
Yep.
to do some more.
We will get you back in the booth for week 8.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Hope you guys have enjoyed the show this week. Come back next week. We got 3 more matches to see who's going to make the playoffs, who's going to get relegated, and they're all going to be with new decks. So see you then.
Good night.